Alrighty, we've started
Okay,
recording.
good morning, everybody. This is Lisa in Colorado Springs, and Sherry up in Denver is the other voice you'll hear during this webinar. And we're talking just about a kind of a general overview of the Medicaid programs, the Colorado adult Medicaid programs. If you have questions, please type them in or certainly raise your hand, and Sherry will address questions as we go along. And we'll stop here and there and leave time for questions or some input as we go along. But again, if you have questions, there's a chat box at the bottom, and Sherry can see those. Or if you don't have that option, click on raise your hand, and she'll get back to you, and we'll talk about your questions. So the agenda for today is not moving. The agenda for today, we're going to talk a little bit about eligibility and the program criteria. We're going to talk about the income, which is money coming in, and the money that is counted and what doesn't count, because there are some things that are exempt from income in some programs. We're going to talk about resources and assets, which means those are the things that you have in savings or excess property, things like that. We're going to look just briefly at the application process and whether it's paper or online would be your best option. Meaning we're going to look at the peak and the paper application and see the differences in between. So getting started, the eligibility criteria is listed here based on the amount of money you get as income for these programs. So you can see that the adult Medicaid, SSI, mandatory Medicaid programs are limited income and resources, and for people that are age 65 or older, or that they're blind, disabled, blind or disabled as defined by the Social Security rules. For all of these programs, you have to be a U.S. citizen or lawfully admitted for 5 years, and that is done by a green card or by lawful admission for work, a work visa, things like that. Old age pension is the next program that you can get a hold of or that you can help clients with. The old age pension program provides financial assistance and may provide full Medicaid benefits for low-income people age 60 or older who meet the criteria. The old age pension program provides financial assistance up to $748 a month, and that's the amount that's from January of this year. So those amounts go up each year, but for 2014, $748 would be the max amount. Other incomes such as wages, Social Security benefits, or SSI may qualify or lower that benefit that you would get from the old age pension. So if you have a Social Security pension of $600 a month, or you have a client with that pension, they may apply for the old age pension program or SSI, and that would bring their income up to the $748. So that means they would get their $600 check from Social Security, then they would get another deposit from the state to make up that difference to $748. And that can be a lot of money for people. Any veterans assistance that you get, a pension from VA or something like that, does count towards income when it comes to the old age pension program. So it's important that people declare all of their income, okay? That oftentimes people will say, well, that was just a $40 pension from a job I worked for just a few years, or a part-time job, but that is considered income, so you want to encourage clients to count all the income. Applicants for old age pension have to stay under the asset or resource limits that are at $2,000 for a single person or $3,000 for a married couple. Those countable resources or assets are things they have in savings of value, so like a checking or savings account, CDs. We'll talk a little bit more about all of this on the next couple of slides, but it would be maybe a second car or a secondary property such as land or something that they own that they don't actually live on. Applicants and recipients of old age pension are required to apply for that Social Security SSI program so that they're getting monies from either both or one or the other. That's determined by Social Security or the DHS, Department of Human Services, in each county. The eligibility criteria for the next programs are the Medicare savings programs. There are several levels of Medicare savings programs. They start at the highest approval level, which is the Qualified Medicare Beneficiary Program, or QMB. And this one is the one that pays all the costs for your Medicare Part B premium. It also will pay for any co-payments, deductibles, or any services that you have under A or B. So it's like having, honestly, a secondary insurance, but it is a Medicaid program that is applied for through the Department of Human Services. If you have clients that may have not taken the Part B of Medicare because they just couldn't afford the premium, this is a way to get them kind of in the back door. So if you do the application for the Medicare Savings Program and they are approved, then eventually it will go through the system and they'll be offered Part B of Medicare earlier than having to wait like an enrollment in that general election period. The QM program not only entitles you to the payment of deductibles and copays, but it also may offer you some other services that people get under full Medicaid. That's something that is determined again by the Department of Human Services, and the eligibility is always determined by them. We as SHIP counselors just help with applications if that's appropriate in your area, and determination or eligibility of determination or eligibility of benefits is always determined by Department of Human Services. The next programs that are available are all considered long-term care programs. The Home Care Allowance program provides cash assistance directly to the person that's applying, the applicant. And what they do with this money is they use it to take care of their needs, their personal needs, home care needs, assistance with activities of daily living, that kind of thing. This program allows even a family member to be the person that cares for them. So if someone applies for the Home Care Allowance program, they will do it again by income and resources eligibility, but also the need for care to avoid going into a nursing home. So a person may get 6 or 10 or 12 hours a week, and they would be paid enough to pay a caregiver that amount. And that, again, that caregiver could be a family member. Home and community-based services and PACE, the Program of All-Inclusive Care for the Elderly, are two of the other long-term care programs that are designed to assist and keep people out of a skilled nursing facility. The income limits for these programs are considerably higher than some of the other ones that we talked about. This year it's up to $2,163 a month for a single person. They're still going to have to be under those same asset and resource limits, the savings as the $2,000 and $3,000, but again, we'll talk about the difference between those in just a few minutes. If you've qualified for the home and community-based services, you can look at enrolling in a PACE. It's important to know that the PACE program is not in all counties. It's only in certain counties within Colorado, so you would want to check and see if there is PACE eligibility in your area. Then if you progress and need the assistance in a skilled nursing facility, the Medicaid program does pay for room and board in an approved skilled nursing facility. Something that's really helpful is if you get a client qualified for the HCBS or any of the other programs under Medicaid and they need to increase the care that they're going to get, it's a simple one-page letter that says we need to increase the care or make a change to the level of Medicaid that they have applied for. All of that information is available on the website for Department of Human Services, and that is www.coloradopeak.force.com. And that information is found a little bit later in the slide presentation, so don't scramble to write that down. The next programs that we're going to touch on briefly are the new programs, some of them new because of the Affordable Care Act. The new adult Medicaid programs are the MAGI Medicaid, and that's the MAGI stands for modified adjusted gross income. And this program affects kids that are 0 to 18 with a household income of 140% of the federal poverty limit. It affects pregnant women at 195%, or adults 19 to 64 without kids at 133% of the federal poverty limit. And I know that that's kind of that can be an obscure number because we don't identify the federal poverty level, but that information again is available on the PEAK website. There is also an adult and children buy-in program for working families that are less than 450% of the federal poverty level, and they can actually purchase Medicaid and have a premium based on a sliding scale. So you may have people that have a fairly good income, and I'm not saying it's a comfortable income, but it's a livable income that may still qualify for Medicaid and can have a small premium based on what that income is. So certainly look at all options for the clients if that's part of your SHIP program. So income. Income is the gross monthly income of the person applying, sometimes the household, so it depends on what program. Social Security pensions would count like this, retirement income from any other pensions or investments. So let's say somebody had a 401k or they had an IRA, something like that, and they were drawing on it. The money that they're taking from that account is considered income, and so there's not any way kind of around that. You have to have declared all income sources. The other thing that can be considered income is alimony that is being paid to the recipient or the client. If you're receiving alimony, in many cases that's counted as income because you are using it for your monthly bills or your regular bills. You have to remember that gross is the operative word here. So if you're looking at someone's Social Security pension and they automatically have their Medicare premium taken out and maybe their Part D premium, you need to count those in or add them back to the number that they're giving you as what I take home and get the gross monthly amount for that. So, you know, for instance, if you're talking to somebody and they say, well, my Social Security check is $600, that may be what they bring home, but you're going to have to add that $104.90 for the Part B in there. So they would be at $704.90 a month. The things that don't count or may not count are if you're applying for benefits under the long-term care programs and you're already receiving aid and attendance payments from the VA, the veterans, that may not count. Child support may also not count as income unless you are applying for benefits for that child. So if you're a grandparent raising grandchildren, and you get a stipend from the state for that, or you're fostering and you get a stipend, it may not count unless you're applying for benefits for those children. Let's see if we have any questions at this point before we go on to talk about resources and assets. Sherry, do we have any questions?
So far we do not. So if anybody wants to raise your hand, I can unmute your line, or if you want to type in your question, I can read it to Lisa. So I'm not seeing any takers right now.
Okay, so let's go on to talk a little bit more about the long-term care programs and what things affect those. So we've talked about income, and these are things that go directly related to your income. So the income, again, is money coming in, Social Security pensions, any other kind of retirement benefits, anything from a 401k or an IRA, those kinds of things, anything that's generating monthly income for you would be considered income. If you have people that are applying for the long-term care programs where the monthly income is about $2,163 a month in income, and they may be over that, you know, maybe they're at $3,000 or $4,000 a month, they may be still eligible to apply to get assistance through Medicaid for the long-term care programs. They can establish what they call an income trust or a Miller Trust. And this is something where they would actually get some documents from the Department of Human Services, and they would fill them out, and they'd get them approved by the bank that they bank at, and they would be allowed to have in excess of that $2,163 in income and still be eligible for Medicaid long-term care. They do have to stay below the regional income maximums that are established by the state in a county area. But honestly, they can make a little over $7,800 a month in some counties in Colorado and still qualify to get Medicaid assistance. What happens with that income trust in most cases is it's an account that's identified by the state because you've identified it, or the client applying has identified it, and all monies go into that account. And then the state determines what portion of that is paid to the nursing facility for your care, and then if there's a shortfall, then the nursing facility makes up the state makes up the difference in payments to the nursing facility. It's a little bit involved to set up one of these. It's a document. It's a matter of notifying the bank and things like that. But the Department of Human Services is usually really pretty good about walking you through that and what you need to do to make that happen. So just because you meet with a client and they're over that $2,163 a month in income, don't kind of count them out right away because there are other limits. The spend down of assets, or the spend down of things you have in savings, are something that Department of Human Services also looks at. You can do a spend down, and it's a term used for a method of doing just what it says, spending down your resources and assets to qualify for Medicaid assistance, but in a long-term care situation. There are approved expenditures like monthly expenses for people's care, personal items, things like that. Generally, if it's related to the person making the application, and it's something that is making their lives more comfortable, maybe they're in a nursing home and they need a new TV, or they would like a recliner chair, a seat lift chair or something, those usually are acceptable purchases. What you can't do is gift or give monies away to family members or other people in an effort to qualify for Medicaid, spending down that money. You can't gift it away. You can't give large sums of money. That's not appropriate. When you're spending down, there are certain guidelines that you need to follow for that. Now, that said, there's something that's called the Spousal Impoverishment Protection Act, and in Colorado, it's designed specifically for keeping the community spouse safe financially and avoiding that thought that Medicaid takes everything from us, In Colorado, it was established that a spouse, and when we're saying the community spouse, we're talking about a married couple, and the community spouse is the person that is staying in the community, and the other person that's applying for Medicaid would be the spouse going into a nursing home. So the community spouse, the one that's staying out in the community, is permitted to keep up to $119,240 in cash resources. That doesn't include a house, the primary residence, things like that. So that's a lot of money for people that have to spend down. But that keeps that spouse from in the community from becoming impoverished and having to spend all the savings down to the $2,000 or $3,000 range for the person in the nursing home to qualify. So the maximum usually is the $119,240. That can be above that on a case-by-case basis, but again, the determining factor of that is the Department of Human Services and the rules that they have behind that. There's more information available at the PEAK website about that specifically, and how that can benefit clients or work against you in a lot of cases. But just know when you're talking to people that mentality of Medicaid took everything from us before we qualified, really doesn't exist. And if you have somebody saying that, that's something we need to look at a little bit closer. So now that we've talked about income, let's talk a little bit about assets and resources. And that last slide kind of mixed the two together because it does affect both the income and the assets for the spousal impoverishment. But when we're talking about assets or resources, we're talking about savings. We're talking about, you know, stocks, bonds, checking, savings, CDs, IRAs, 401ks, cash from any source that isn't a lump sum. So if you have, you know, $1 million under the old oak tree in a coffee can, then certainly that could be counted as an asset or a resource, excuse me. Investment and rental income, so maybe you have a client who has a primary residence here in Colorado and then owns another residence in another state or a piece of property or something that's not being used. That would be considered an asset, and in some instances they would be required to sell that or at least attempt to sell that for fair market value. So if mom leaves Connecticut and comes here to live with you because she's sick and she's going to access long-term care Medicaid benefits and she still has that house back in Connecticut, Colorado may require her to put the house for sale for fair market value and be proactive about making a sale for that property in order to gain the income from it. Second, cars or recreational vehicles are also counted as a resource. People applying for Medicaid are certainly permitted to have one vehicle to get to and from doctors, things like that. But if they have more than one vehicle or a recreational vehicle, then it may be considered an asset or a resource. So you want to be mindful about having them declare everything so it's all looked at. Life insurance with a cash value, we know that as whole life insurance, would also be considered a resource. And that would be because if you have a life insurance policy that's a whole life policy and it has some value to it before you die, you may be able to cash that in and get cash from it or take a loan against it. So if it's a whole life policy, then it would count as a resource depending on the value of it. So when you're doing an application, DHS might ask for a copy of the policy and what the current cash value is. So that's something that is determined by Department of Human Services, but it would be something that the client would have to provide information on. So talking about assets and resources that don't count would be your primary residence. You're allowed to have a house, own a home in Colorado, and be eligible for Medicaid. In most cases, people qualify having their primary residence. There is a number out there that has some limits on it, and I guess what I mean by that is if you have a primary residence and maybe the client has the primary residence and it's owned outright, if that has equity in the house, not necessarily the value, but the equity in the home is over $548,000, then they may disqualify themselves for Medicaid. Now, you may live in a house that's worth $550,000 or $600,000 and still have a mortgage, but if you have a mortgage on it, then the only thing that counts as disqualifying somebody would be the actual equity, the amount that house would be worth versus what is owed on it. Again, a decision or a determination that's made by the Department of Human Services. The first automobile we talked about is a necessity, and so that's not counted as an asset. Term life insurance, and that means that this life insurance terminates at a certain event, age-wise, or it also is limited. So you may have a 20-year term policy. The only time you can get money out of a term life insurance policy is actually if you die. So that doesn't have a cash value because it has no cash available until death of the person applying. When it comes to burial policies, there are burial policies that you can buy into very much like a whole life insurance policy that would have a value to it, but there are irrevocable burial policies as well. So it would be like having a whole life burial policy that has cash value and you can cash it out, or you have a term life kind of burial policy where there is no cash value to it until you die and access the benefits. And so you can't reverse it and get your money back out of it. Other things that don't count towards assets and resources or income would be food stamps. And I guess this is your assets and resources because a lot of people will have some money remaining each month on their SNAP card, their food stamp card. And so maybe they have $100 or $200 on there. Even if they've saved that amount of money on there, that's not considered an asset or a resource. And then, of course, personal belongings. So, you know, your antiques in the house or your big diamond ring, that kind of thing, isn't considered an asset because that's considered your personal property. Do we have any questions at this time, Sherry?
Yes, we do. Thank you for stopping.
Sure.
Diane would like to know, she wants some clarification on the income trust, and it's how she worded it, that's why I didn't answer her, was does the state use the excess income down to $2,163 per month? It was when you were talking about Miller Trust.
That's a really good question. What happens with that is the state determines what portion of that trust is paid monthly. The income is paid monthly to the skilled nursing facility or the nursing facility on the applicant's behalf. When that applicant dies, then the state takes the money that's left in that account. But in most cases, yes, you pay most of your income towards nursing home, or a maximum portion of that to your income, or excuse me, to the nursing home. It doesn't take it down to the 2163 because you'll still be required to pay a majority. But again, that's a decision that is determined by Department of Human Services. They'll give an actual dollar amount of the income that needs to be paid to the facility.
Okay. Then someone else, Denise would like to know if someone had a collection of something worth lots of money, does that count?
Wow, that's a good question. Honestly, I don't think so, but I would have to check on that. Let me just make a note and shoot an email back to see if that's something that counts, like a stamp collection or a really expensive coin collection or something like that. I would think not, because it would be personal property, but I would like to check on that and see if it's considered an asset.
Okay. Jan would like to know, can an RV be considered a primary residence, and what is the equity limit in a primary residence?
The equity limit is $548,000 equity.
And if someone is oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Lisa.
That goes up annually, of course, but if someone, that's another great question. I would think that an RV could be considered their primary residence, but I would have to check on that as well.
Okay, because we do know that some people are lifers or whatever they call them.
Sure.
Our special
Lifers.
needs lifers. Sorry, I have an RV. That's what can I say?
Yeah.
Jan also wants to know, are special needs trusts for disabled considered an asset?
No. No, and those are considered kind of differently than anything else. If they put money aside for an adult disabled child, then that is figured a completely different way, because that's set aside to support the adult disabled child.
Okay. Diane says some of her clients have easily converted burial policies. Some of her clients have easily converted burial policies to irrevocable, just to let everybody know.
Absolutely, and that's a good tip. Thanks, Diane. You can do that, and I think you have pretty good luck doing that. If you have a current policy with a funeral home back east or wherever the the person plans to be buried, it's usually fairly easy to change that over to irrevocable.
Okay. Jan would like to know, is cemetery property considered an asset?
If it's revocable, yes. If you could sell that and it could become an asset, yes. But usually that is part of a burial situation. If you have a burial policy, then usually that's part of that burial policy.
Okay, and then we have someone else with their hand up and not typing in, so let me unmute their line. This is Steve, has a question. Steve? Hello, Steve? You have your hand up. I don't know, maybe he doesn't have a microphone. Now we can hear you, yeah.
Okay, first time I've used this mic.
Okay.
What about assets and resources that come from family members? Housing and somebody providing housing for the person, or perhaps some monthly income. How is that taken into account?
That's a great question, Steve. If the person is living in a house that's owned by a family member, then of course that's not considered an asset of the person applying because it's not their house. If they're getting income from a child, they're helping pay bills or they're giving them $300 or $400 a month, that amount of money is counted as income. But it's not necessarily counted as an asset, the home they're living in, because it's not in their name.
So it could disqualify them.
If the child's sending them money every month, it very well could disqualify them, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Let's see. Denise, I'm looking to see, says she have another question, but I don't see it. I'm going to unmute you, Denise. Denise, I've unmuted your line. Do you? Okay. She's not coming through, so Denise, go ahead and type it in if you have another question. And that's the end of the questions.
Okay, so let's go ahead and continue on about what happens next. So there is something in Colorado called a state recovery. So if someone opts for benefits or applies for benefits under the long-term care programs, and this doesn't right now include all the Medicaid programs, just the long-term care ones, when that person dies, the state will attach a home or a bank account to recover what has been paid or a portion of what's been paid by the state to help care for that person. There are a number of reasons they do not do a state recovery, and again, that's something that is determined by the state and the laws that are set down by the state. But under limited circumstances, they may not do that. For instance, if you have a married couple and the community spouse is staying in the home and has not accessed any Medicaid benefits for long-term care of any kind, and the spouse that's in the nursing home on Medicaid passes away, the state's not going to do a recovery of the monies paid because that house is now owned by the community spouse. It's the same kind of thing if you have an adult disabled child that lives there. There are some other exceptions, but that's again something that is determined by the state and the Department of Human Services. And I have email at, or excuse me, a website that's listed down there, and I just noticed that it is misspelled. It's comedicaidrecovery.com. So that we need to adjust in the slides before we send them out, but I've made a note of that, Sherry. So you can access this estate recovery rules on that website if you spell it correctly. And it gives you some really good information about you know, what's recoverable, what's not, how it works, those kinds of things. So it's important that you look that up. Oftentimes when someone's applying for Medicaid, the DHS, Department of Human Services and Social Services, will send out letters explaining a state recovery or a brochure. So people should be aware of this. This is not like they're applying for Medicaid going in blind and you know, the family finds out later that they're recovering from the sale of a home or something. So this is something that is usually well known by people that are applying for benefits. We do a publication in our office that is the Colorado Adult Medicaid Programs and Veterans Benefit Book. That's easy for me to say. If you would like to have this publication, it is free, and you can just shoot me an email at that address that's on the screen right there, and we'll be happy to send books to you at your agency to use. It's kind of a quick reference guide for people that help those that are on programs, you know, aging programs or need to get on aging programs or Medicaid programs. This is one of the graphs that's in the book, and this explains, and you can't really see it very well without kind of getting right up, your nose right up in the screen, but it gives you some ideas about what income is, if your clients may or may not qualify for programs under Medicaid. This is only a guide, and as ship navigators, we don't make decisions, again, whether or not people are qualified. We assist them with the application if that's something you do in your program, and then we pass that along to Department of Human Services to make the final decision. But this is kind of a little guide or a little cheat sheet to see if maybe some of your clients fall into these realms. The new part of this is there's a little list of the federal poverty guidelines for this year over on the right-hand side of that, so that kind of puts a little credence or a little number attached to that FPL thing when we refer to it. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the application process. So you want to talk to your client about their financial situation and what their medical needs are to determine if they may be qualified for the programs. A lot of times you'll meet with a client and you know, they're having a hard time paying their Part B premium, or they're having a hard time, you know, paying for some co-pays on a Medicare Advantage plan, those kinds of things. So those are the people that you would want to ask whether or not they qualify based on income. So you would check their income, you may check their need for medical assistance, that kind of thing. You may also suggest if it's somebody that doesn't qualify for Medicaid, they might, and they're under 65, not on Medicare, they might want to check on the Colorado Marketplace for Health Insurance at connectforhealthco.com, because they may qualify for actually purchasing health insurance policy, and because of their limited income, may qualify for the advanced premium tax credits and things like that. After you've talked to the client and you both feel like maybe they might qualify for one or more of the programs, you want to ask your client to gather all the required documentation to apply for the program. So they're going to want to have proof of income, and again, this is not just your proof of Social Security income. This would be any kind of income in the household. So Social Security, retirement pension checks, monthly monies from an IRA, CDs, anything like that that comes in monthly is considered income, and you're going to want to look at the gross amounts for those. When you're looking at your assets and resources, at the very minimum, they're going to want to see the most current 3 months of checking and savings account statements and maybe money fund statements. They're going to want to see proof of any stocks or bonds, IRAs or CDs, and they're going to want to see all vehicle registrations as well. And then they want to look at the life insurance or burial policies to make sure, to confirm that they are irrevocable and that they don't have a current cash value. Or if you have a whole life policy and it does have a cash value, that it's under the certain limits. You also want to have proof of any kind of trust documents for any trust that the applicant is owner or partial owner in. So if the person is applying and they have that trust that someone was talking about for a disabled child, and that's in their name for the child, they're going to have that documentation so that DHS knows that that is something set aside for a disabled child. Usually they're wanting a picture ID, a state-issued picture ID, and your current health insurance cards. If you have somebody that's already on Medicare and they've been issued that red, white, and blue Medicare card, then that's proof that they've already established their citizenship in the United States, or their legal residency. So they would not need to have a birth certificate or something more involved like that. Always they want to have a state-issued picture ID. So, and not necessarily just state-issued. It could be a military ID, it could be your state ID card, it could be a number of official documents, passports, things like that, that have a picture and prove that you are who you are. And then, of course, any legal documents that would affect the applicant in this process. They're going to want proof of your monthly expenses as well. So rent or mortgage, utility bills that you might pay, telephone bills. If you have child support coming in and you're applying for a child for benefits as well, you're going to want to claim that. You're going to want to have proof of any medical costs that you've incurred in the last 3 months, and that's including co-pays for pharmacy and things like that. If you are a veteran and there's a question on the application about that, and if there's someone in the household, a husband, wife, whatever, that were in the wars and they are considered veterans, they're going to require that they go to the local veteran county service center and get a letter saying they are or are not eligible for financial benefits. And there's local county service centers in most of the counties across the state. In that yellow colored book, it has a list of the local county service offices for the VA. So that might be helpful to you as well. Any other legal documents would be, again, the power of attorney, anything that affects the actual applicant that they might be involved in. And then step 3 is to begin the application process. And you can either do this online with the PEAK website, or you can do a paper application. And we're going to take a look-see at the online option first. So when you're going online, and this is the coloradopeak.force.com website, it's down at the bottom of that slide. We kind of inserted it big. In order to do anything on this site except directly that's going to affect an application, you have to create an account. So you would click the Create an Account button for somebody that's brand new to this, or if they have an account, you can sign in. This shows what you click on. If you have to make a new account, if you're creating that account, you'll see the page that says Setting Up an Account, and it has information about the person. The person's going to have to establish a username and a password. They will have to have an email address, and oftentimes what we do with clients is help them set up an email address through Google or Yahoo or MSN, something like that, if they don't already have one. They can request that they get all documents by email, but they can also request that they still use regular mail service too. If you already have an account, you'll get the Please Log In. The Please Log In screen, and then you put in the person's username and password. This is something that SHIP people don't usually have access to. Often in our office when we're helping people either through the Connect for Health Colorado or through one of the Medicaid process, we let them establish their own password. That way they have some privacy there, and they type it in and they maintain that themselves. If they are comfortable with us having that, we put that in file for them so that if they call us with questions, we can log on and look at situation. When you start, once you've established that account, you can start a new application, or you can link to an old application and look at that. But if you look at the left-hand side of the screen here, you can actually click on a tab that says My Benefits, and when you do that, it looks like this, and it shows you, you have to type in your Social Security or your state ID number, or a case number that you have if it's in process. And if you do that, then you can get a screen that actually shows you what benefits people are eligible for and what they're not eligible for, or the status of what's going on. So on here you can see that it says who is involved with this. So if you have more than one person in the household, it tells you that. It tells what kind of program they're applying for, a cash assistance program or maybe a medical program, and if it's a medical program it would say that here. It'll tell them the effective date. Usually the application date is here, and then it'll say, you know, the determination is made because the household exceeds the program limits or some other identification. This is a really handy dandy thing to have, but as SHIP people we don't usually maintain this information for all of our clients. It just depends on their comfort level. But certainly if you're going to maintain somebody's username and password for a Medicaid application, you want to make sure that you're mindful that that's health protected information or it's sensitive information, so you don't want to leave papers laying around with that information. You want to keep them locked up. There's also a tab here to report any changes once they have been eligible for benefits, so an address change, an income change, many number of changes. Most recently the new website allows you to do redeterminations and recertifications, where in the past it has not, but you can now do those online for clients. And it talks about making changes, type them right in, and you can download documents now. There's a lot of different options. So I encourage you, if you're not familiar with the PEAK website, to contact the trainers up in Boulder and get a training for your SHIP organization about how the PEAK website works, because it's an amazing kind of tool and it's making life a lot easier for people. So now that we've taken a brief look at the online PEAK application, let's take a little look-see at the paper application, which is kind of hard to see on here. But the paper application is pretty standard. There's a column that's being pointed at by the red arrow, and in most counties you actually have to choose what program you're applying for. It's important to note on that you have to check. If you're applying for food assistance, the SNAP program, you want to check that box. If you're applying for the Medicare Savings Program, you want to check that box, because many counties won't look at the programs that are not marked. Some of them have a policy of screening for everything, but many of them will only look at programs that you have marked. So that's really important to know. If you're using the paper application and you've been approved and you have a change in your current Medicaid status to require long-term care, this is that shortened letter that I was referring to that you can just fill out with the name and case number. Then it gives you an option to say, you know, I currently get Medicaid, or I have SSI or old age pension, and now I need to upgrade my coverage, or I need to apply for, you know, help in a nursing facility or long-term care at home with HCBS. This is so much easier than filling out an entire new application with Medicaid, because they're already retaining your information on there. So it's not you know, something that there's not always a need to go completely through that whole application again. The next form on here is for the nutrition program only. It used to be called food stamps, but they call it SNAP now, which stands for Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. And this is a much shorter application than the regular one. So if people are only applying for SNAP, for food assistance, this would be what you would use, instead of having to do that complete application and get that done over and over again. So DHS is making it a lot easier in a couple of ways. They're using the website for automation, which is really nice, but they also have some applications that are considerably shorter and less intrusive than the original Medicaid application if you're just changing status or applying for different programs. Some counties prefer that you use one or the other for certain programs, so I can't encourage you enough to contact your local Department of Human Services or Social Services to make sure which application method they prefer and is much more effective for them, so you don't slow up the process. There are certified application assistance sites, they're called CAS, and they can verify original documents before they're actually submitted with the application to avoid actually sending, you know, somebody's original birth certificate or original marriage certificate along with the application. So you can find on the PEAK website CAS areas that can certify those documents in an app that they have on their website, and again, that's the Colorado peak.force.com. We encourage you, if you are a site that helps with the Medicaid applications of any level, the Medicare savings or the Social Security, or excuse me, the Medicare savings programs, those kinds of things, encourage your clients to keep copies of every document that they submit. We certainly want to encourage you to use your program guidelines to use this information that we've just given you, because some SHIPs don't do Medicaid applications at all. So you can give somebody the information for screening and say, if you're under this amount, you contact the Department of Social Services. But the bottom line is, as a SHIP counselor, you go by your program's guidelines to offer assistance. So either you help with the application or you maybe don't, but seek counsel or guidance from your program administrator. Okay, so we're at the point where we can ask some questions. Do we have questions we can type in or raise your hand and ask questions?
Well, Lisa, Diane wants to tell everyone that the one-page letter that you're talking about was awesome, and her clients have received a first intake call within 2 days.
Yay.
But she does have a question: have the glitches been worked out of PEAK? So I can unmute her if she wants to talk about specific glitches.
Yes and no, honestly. There was just a new update webinar that was put out, I want to say it was Monday or Tuesday, talking about the new changes where you can actually use an iPhone or a smartphone to take pictures of your documents and upload them. And I think we're going to continue to have some small glitches, but it's a work in progress. But if you've been one of those people that have been around using the applications for a long time, you know that it went from like a 25-page application to an 8-page application to now some electronic. So, you know, leaps and bounds, leaps and bounds. So I'm sure we'll always have glitches when it's digital.
Okay, then Jan Street has a couple questions. The proceeds of the home sale by a family member for deceased single Medicaid recipient is subject to recovery?
Yes. If that home was owned by the person applying and they died accessing Medicaid benefits, then when that property is sold, then recovery would be made by the state. Yes.
Okay. And do you have contact information for the PEAK trainers in Boulder?
I do, but I don't have it right at my fingertips. Let me see. Yes, I do have that. And that's a wonderful group of people. They work with the Connect for Health Colorado, and they'll come to any agency and do trainings about PEAK, and they'll get as involved as you want or not involved. And you can go to, let's see who does this, PEAK Outreach, it's all one word, P-E-A-K, Outreach at bouldercounty.org.
And county spelled out?
Boulder County is spelled out, all one word, yeah.
Okay.
.org.
So let me just type that in for everybody here.
PEAK Outreach, all one word, at Boulder, B-O-U-L-D-E-R, county spelled out, .org.
Okay, here we go. There. Went out to everybody.
Okay.
Alrighty.
More questions?
Yes, we do. Sue did not type hers in, so I'm going to unmute her. Hey, Sue.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, hi Sue.
Oh, okay. We're curious about why they need proof of expenses.
That's a good question. They need proof of expenses because if you are a married couple, for instance, and the community spouse is going to stay at home and the other person applying is going to a nursing facility, they're going to want to know what kind of expenses that community spouse has. If you're a single person and you're applying for programs, they're going to want to know, if a majority of your income goes for rent or mortgage, if maybe you're eligible for utility help through LEAP, those kinds of things. So they want to get a balance of what's coming in and what's going out.
Okay. And we also are curious what we would do with if we get a client who has no computer, an email address, how have we accomplished anything for that person? Where will they use it?
Yeah. What is interesting about that question is if they're going to use the PEAK website to access benefits or do applications, they really are required to have an email address. They can, during that process, say the only thing they want to do is manage this by regular mail. If they don't access the account, then I think we're at the paper application steps, and they have to use, snail mail and go through that kind of thing.
So they don't need an email address if they use a paper application?
No, ma'am.
Okay, thanks.
You bet.
All right. Jan would like to know, are credit card statements needed?
No, not necessarily. I mean, if that's something that somebody's paying a majority of their income to, then certainly they would want to provide that as proof. But no, they want to see monthly expenses like housing, utilities, telephone bills, medical bills, things like that.
Okay. And I don't see any more, but if you just, okay, maybe just talk about how to get the yellow book. And
okay, so if you want to get a copy of those little gold books, the little yellow ones, you can email me at theshiphelp@ppacg.org. You can call the SHIP Navigator help number, which is listed there, and I put that this number is for SHIP counselors and navigators only. Please don't give that number to your clients, because if I have clients calling on that number, I'm going to send them back to you. That's just to help the SHIP counselors. So if you need more information or you want to access or get those books, certainly call or email me. The other thing you can do is send an email to Sherry up at the Division of Insurance, and she passes them along, and I can send you books or answer questions as well.
And we will be posting this webinar to the Senior Health website along with the PowerPoint. Probably take about a week. I don't work full-time, that's why. Jan would like to know, the PowerPoint notes are available. They will be, Jan. You'll be able to look at the notes section. Does anybody else have any questions? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Lisa. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Go ahead.
If we don't have any other questions, then I think we're all done. That was kind of record time. I hope it wasn't too fast for everyone. I think we kept a pretty good pace, but we'll hang on just another minute or two to see if there is any questions, because we had scheduled 2 hours for this webinar. So yay, everybody can go back to work.
Okay. And Jan, that's on the Senior Health, on the DORA website. I'll go ahead and I'll find it for you and I'll type it in so that you'll just have a link. It's actually, oh, excuse me. It's let's see. Hold on here, Jan. We'll do the
If you
www.
Google Colorado Division of Insurance.
Yeah, I just found our vanity, so
okay,
it's
good.
www.dora.colorado.gov/SHIP, and I'll just send that to everybody. So if you go there, you'll get to the Senior Health website. And let's see, thanks. Okay. And everybody else says thanks.
Okay, great. Thanks for joining us. And if you have questions, certainly send them our way, and we'll do our best to answer them. Thanks for joining us.
All righty. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye.